Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my first video in Judo breakdowns. The purpose of this channel is to discuss Judo technique at a very detailed level, what I agree with in terms of what you might see on the internet, how I might do things a bit differently, and really trying to break things down in a way that's understandable and is logical and in line with the principles of judo. There's a lot of videos out there that uh, maybe they have a bit of a misconception in terms of the way I think judo is meant to be performed, and I would like to probably offer my opinion on where I agree and where I may disagree with what's being presented. Um, I wanted to start with this YouTube channel uh, on this particular video of Harai Goshi because I think it does a good job of demonstrating the purpose of this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be cutting in and out of the video and explaining basically what I agree with, what I disagree with, and giving my context on that. So let's start.
So for Harai Goshi, okay, we want to make sure that we start south of the elbow, get a nice sleeve grip here, okay? And my pointer is going to go right on his collarbone, and now our hands are ready to...
So what's being demonstrated here is, I'll just back it up a little bit in terms of what you can see. This is a very classic traditional grip for almost all techniques in judo, like a starting grip. Um, and so there's nothing wrong with it. Some might argue that you can do a little bit more unorthodox, but yeah, I mean, this is the first grip that you learn, and it's perfectly fine in terms of a starting point.
Okay? For Harai Goshi, a sweeping hip, we want to bring him over this hip corner. So the direction is actually up and over that hip. All right? And when you look at the technique that way, you can see how it's starting to slowly change from Uchimata.
Right. So this is an important point, is to talk about the kazushi of the throw, or some would call it the shape of the throw. So Harai Goshi is a very l- big throw, and the direction of the throw isn't straightforward. It would be more forward right corner. So you're taking them over, in this case, when you're doing it right, over their right hip, and it's going to be in a forward direction. So that's from the blugi or the uke's perspective, that their kazushi is going in that direction. So I agree with what they're presenting here.
Uchimata. Okay? Now, how do we get him over this hip? Okay? It comes from first my hands and second of all my feet. Okay? The hands are very similar to Uchimata, that there's a nice pull, okay? And I tell my students, we don't want to get too far in the armpit because the leverage is just not the same to pull this person, okay? We don't want to be too far on the sleeve either because now there's just too much slack in the position, okay? We try and go from the elbow and maybe just like an inch or two south from there. And that's going to give us a nice control over the limb and give us a nice extension that we want for Harai Goshi, okay? For the lapel hand, I'm going to put my pointer maybe right on his collarbone here, okay? And that's going to give me a lot of slack and some play in the collar so that when I want to get that nice extension over his hip, I can start to guide him over that leg, okay? Now for my hand.
So this is probably the first part of the video that I personally disagree with. Not in terms of the grip that he ends up taking, but I think it's the advice that he's providing. So certainly you can take this grip, and it'll work. But I think the rationale is really a little bit misplaced, right? So at the end of the day, you want a grip that allows you to generate the kazushi to execute the throw, right? So where you put your left hand and right hand um, will have certain, say, positives and benefits of when it comes to executing the throw. So, for example, he talks about the left hand being too high up, um, or being too low, and that you want to kind of go right to near the elbow. Not a lot of discussion about why in particular, but in my view, really what you're looking to do is, as we talked about before, you want to generate Kazushi to Uke's front right corner, right? So if you go really close to the armpit, um, it's really great for efficiency of energy used, right? Because there's not very much slack. The problem really is that you're kind of going from 0 to 100, and it's tough to really move someone. Um, it's you're starting in that gear basically, right? When you go all the way to the bottom of the sleeve, it's kind of like you're really having to kill all that slack first before you even get any movement in. So the rationale of kind of going by the elbow, classically speaking, that's the kind of rationale behind it. Now, lots of judo players do grab higher or lower, and it's going to depend, I think, on your uke, right? So don't over-prescribe the hand placement because sometimes in competition you're not going to get that hand placement, but you're still going to want to throw that person with Harai Goshi. So don't worry so much about that your hand isn't in that thing, but understand the adjustment you have to make when you have a different position. Okay, I'm low on the sleeve. Okay, that means there's a lot more slack. I'm going to have to really pull and rotate my arm to take away all the slack before that person moves and therefore generate any kazushi, right? The right hand, I think, actually, the explanation here is probably the bigger thing I have a gripe with. Not a gripe, let's say disagreement, where he just says that put it on the chest, basically, right? Why do you do that? Why do you put a hand on the chest? The chest doesn't have any sort of lifting action in and of itself, right? So, and lots of judo players throw very successfully Harai Goshi with a hand all the way around the neck, let's say, in more like Koshi, Ruma type of position, or just even a hand right behind the neck, or even over the back, right? And why? What that can do is give you more lifting action in that breaking the uke to the front right corner. There is a validity to having a hand on the chest, like the way that he's demonstrating, but it is not for primarily, in my view, to gain the kazushi that you need, right? Because it's a very inefficient way of getting that kazushi. Why don't you just go underneath his armpit for like that? That would give you a handle to work with essentially. The reason you do that in holding the chest is it's actually for defensive purposes as well. So it can contribute. It's less efficient to the kazushi, but what it does is that it allows you to react defensively if you were to be attacked while getting that grip. The big flaw of over the back grips is you better throw them because there's no defense on your right side, right? So when you have your hand on their chest, you can A, feel that movement, and B, react defensively to a situation, counterattack, or maybe they're beating you to the punch in terms of executing the throw. So I don't think, in terms of executing the throw, that his reason is really well articulated. I do think that traditionally and classically, this is the grip, and so I'm not going to say that that's the wrong grip, but all I'm saying is that the rationale is probably not the right rationale.
Okay. Now for my hands, I'm trying to again get to that nice angle for Harai Goshi. So my elbow of my sleeve hand is actually gonna pull up to that angle. Okay? And I always tell my students too, I try and tell my students to think of more about their elbow than their hand. Okay? If we just think about the hand, only my hand is gonna move and my elbow stays behind. Okay? But if I think about elbowing someone behind me, that elbow is going to open, and look how my hand elevates. Okay? So really think about your elbow pulling up. For the hands, when we step,
So this point that he makes about elbows and hands, I think it's a little bit silly, to be honest. What you're doing really is you just have a point of reference for somebody, right? Okay, I really want to make sure that I'm not being lazy with my kazushi with my left arm because that's a common problem, and folks don't really lift and pull as much as they ought to, right? So he's drawing the analogy of elbowing someone behind them. What we might say in some of our clubs in Canada is we're looking for our wristwatch. Okay, what's the time? And that's your wrist basically. And so that it gets the same action you're actually seeing here. Basically, the wrist is going up, and you're checking the time. It's maybe a less and less relevant example these days, but nonetheless, it's kind of doesn't matter, right? Because it's just a point of reference. How do you want to achieve this position, and how you want to kind of think about the motion of that arm? It's the same difference, really, right? So no point in putting one ahead of the other. You can say either, but the key is that the left arm is working to generate the gazushi into the uke's front right corner. Also, incidentally, as you can see here, uh, the demonstration doesn't actually result in the elbow um, hitting somebody behind him. So maybe this is an artifact of the demonstration, but let's continue.
we want to make sure we get a nice kuzushi and off balancing. And remember, it's at that angle coming across the uke's hip. Okay? For my feet, right, we're moving the whole foot device over towards the hip we want. Meaning my lead leg has to turn over and my paddle leg has to drive back. So something that we really want to work on for Harai Goshi is a body connection.
Okay, so there's something that I think is missing in this instruction here when it comes to the generation of Kazushi, and it's a something that I'm spending a lot of time discussing, but it's perhaps the most important critical part of any throw. And you have to evaluate the Kazushi that's generated not by what you've done and what the Tori has done, but what you have to look at is the body position of the uke. Yeah. So if the uke, and I'll just step it back a little bit here, if in the course of the throw or even the um, demonstration of the technique, you notice very vertical. So at some point, so and this is what is very common for a lot of judo players is they practice technique. Their uke doesn't move an inch. Their upper body doesn't get broken at all, and they are throwing basically a brick wall, right? And that's because they haven't paid attention to whether or not their effort to generate Guzushi has worked. Yeah, they're like, my arm is up, my hand is pulling, my right and the hand or left hand are pulling. Yeah, but this person hasn't moved. So why are you like 5 steps further ahead, right? You haven't even uh, started rolling the boulder at all. So this is something that is important. You have to notice those things as part of a demonstration of a technique. Anyways, I think he's moving on to a different point, but let's go on.
Between us so that when I backstep and pull in, we get that nice connection from my hip to my oblique to my rib. Right? We want that nice body connection. Okay?
I agree with this. Yes, you do need, and this is a big problem with a lot of players, is that they leave way too much of a space. They essentially what you have is a sort of fishing expedition, right? You're sticking your leg out, your hands are kind of working, but then there's so much space I could fit an arm in there or a leg in between the two of you, right? So really, a lot of players leave way too much space to effectively throw someone. So it's a good point of emphasis. Um, and the reason why you do want that is because what it does is when you're nice and close, the amount of effort you're expending is as efficient as possible, right? So you can imagine I pick up a weight, right? And if it's a 30-pound dumbbell and I grab it with my arm fully extended, like straight, and I try to lift it up straight, it's a lot of work. But when I bring it closer to my body, it's the same amount of weight, but it feels a lot lighter. And that's because I'm being more efficient with my uh, body mechanics. And that's what this comes down to. So, so that's a good point.
One thing that we really want to focus on too for Harai Goshi is my hip. Okay, it's a Koshiwaza, categorized by a hip throw. So what we want to do, if I could face this way maybe, I want my hip to eclipse Ryan's hips. Okay, what does that mean? When I step into the technique, okay, just to let go of my hands really quickly, I want my hip to shoot past my opponent's hip. Okay, so one more time. It's a hip technique. So when I step across, I'm going to scoot my hip out. So that when it's time to finish the technique, right, he's going to go over my hip, and we'll get that nice rotation that we're looking for. Okay. Another tip that we want for Harai Goshi, I call it the pylon leg. Like at a construction site, they drill the pylons in. Okay, that's going to be my back leg. Okay, in this case, my left leg. Okay. The reason why I call it a pylon leg is that I want it to stomp and set the tone for the technique. Right? Every time you come in, you should hear it. For my feet, right, we're moving the whole foot device over towards the hip we want. Meaning my lead leg has to turn over and my pylon leg has to drive back. The reason why.
So let's talk about just a couple things that this video just raised, which is A, the hip placement, and B, the support leg, the left support leg. So he's made a good emphasis to talk about the placement of the hip and it being past the right side of Uke's hip. That's very important because to avoid this fishing exercise. So you've committed to the throw, you're in, and your hip is so far in that it's actually a little bit past. Part of the reason you want that is it makes it more difficult for someone to escape the throw. So you can imagine if your hip isn't past their own hip, that allows them to kind of, as you're trying to execute the throw, they can circle to their right and make the big throw into a big miss, essentially, right? So if your hip is coming just past theirs, then you will be ahead of them and you can catch them before they can really circle out, right? Um, and it's also a point of the fulcrum, right? So it creates the fulcrum that they are ostensibly going over. So um, you want the fulcrum to be kind of in front of them as opposed to into you, right? So if your hip is not far enough, you're creating a fulcrum that is resulting in them being thrown into your body as opposed to being thrown um, next to you, right? So that's an important piece. The other point that he's talked about is the footwork. I do think the right foot that he's using is a little bit too advanced, like it's coming a little too far forward. But you have to kind of have more Kazushi in when he's demonstrating it. So that's problem number one. But problem the part two, the left foot, I do agree. He calls it a pylon foot. I would just call it a support foot. It's important that it really comes down strong. And what I like is that he's on the front of his foot, so it's a forward action that is happening. A lot of judo players land that foot flat, perfectly flat, and what that does is when you have to support both bodies, you're kind of 50-50 teetering, whereas you don't want that. You actually want to be going forward. So if you plant with with your feet up, with your left foot up like that, the way he's demonstrated, it drives the throw forward because your own body mechanics will want to go forward when if when you have your leg foot planted like that. So if you try it out, just try to stand with one foot flat. You'll find okay, you're pretty wobbly all directions. Now, if you were to try to stand on one foot with your foot up like that, then you'll find you'll tend to fall forward, and that's good because you are agreeing with the uke's kuzushi. You're in the same direction, whereas if you're that's kind of going to amplify the fact that they're going that way. So you want that foot to go in. The only point that I would raise is probably about that left foot is I like to see it even deeper. And I tell my students like, let's get that foot as deep as you can in between their legs, even past their legs if you can. Like whatever you can get. Like the deeper you can get, the more lower your center of gravity can be and past their center of gravity, and you can really just um, take guys out in a way by doing that. So really, I would emphasize the foot position's good with the left foot, but I would get it deeper, as deep as you can. If you can get that foot past the back of their heels, you will be golden. Like you will be in an excellent throwing position. Okay, so let's continue.
Why the pylon leg is important is because in a certain exchange for a brief second, there's going to be an exchange of energy and weight between us, okay? At one point for Harai Goshi, my one leg is going to hold my body weight and my opponent's body weight, okay? So it's important that it's placed properly. When my pylon leg drives down, my lead leg comes up. Now when we come in, right, when we finish this technique, I want to make sure that my right sweeping leg is one device and my forehead pendulums down. So a good way to kind of think about your finishing for Harai Goshi is similar to Osotogari, okay? So when we do Osotogari and when we do Harai Goshi, we want our leg, our reaping, sweeping leg, to be one piece. Meaning that I don't want my leg to break around the resistance of my uke's leg. So in this case, if it's Osotogari, it breaks this way. For specifically Harai Goshi, what I don't want to see is for us to come in and then break over this resistance. Okay, it has to be one piece from my foot to my hip. Okay, what also works is my forehead. It's like a pendulum. So as my foot goes back, my head goes down. Right? You can see how almost one whole half of my body is working together. And this is very similar for a Harai Goshi finish. Okay? This is a good drill to develop your Harai Goshi, and the reason why it works well is that it really teaches you to feel that sticking point of your hip and your body right before you execute the throw.
So when it comes to the leg, the right leg is, I think, rightfully characterized as a finisher to the throw. Most of the work should be done at the time that leg is coming through. And the point that he's raised about the leg breaking at the knee is 100% correct. You don't want to do that. Uh, I don't know if he's articulated it completely, but essentially, you want to transfer as much energy into the uke to take them over. And when you bend at the knee like that, you your foot continues to move, but you don't. It only means that your foot's moving more, and it's taking nothing nothing is of that motion is getting transferred to the uke, and it's really going against kind of a core thing with judo, which is the maximum efficiency, right? So I do agree that you do need to keep that right leg nice and rigid in order to maximally transfer your energy to the uke so they can go over. The point with the head is a good one as well. So imagine if you were to stand perfectly straight and you were to say, okay, I want my leg to um, reap back as much as possible. Your leg can only go so far back. Like we are not some alien species where our leg can act so independently from the rest of our body. And so, in order to really get that leg even higher and higher, you actually have to drop the head and the upper body down in order for you to reach it. There's no stop to that really. So when I tell my students, I was like, I want to see the leg go all the way to 12 o'clock, which is like straight to the ceiling. And in competition, I want to see it go like even more so, because um, you're really just really taking this person all the way over. And when you're practicing this technique and you're really trying to get that down, if you can get to 12 o'clock in a practice setting, then in a competition setting, you might not get to 12 o'clock. But hey, you know what? If you get to 3 o'clock, that's pretty darn good. And if it's because when you practice only the three, you're probably gonna only get like half of that, let's say, of the lift, right? And so you have to try to aim uh, more the maximum efficient position to the throw during your practice, and then that will translate. Hopefully, a lot of that translates to your competition. But I think still it's a good point that the upper body has to go down. I would just say that it doesn't have to end at the 50-50 as the video is demonstrating. But he hasn't said that it limits it. But I'm just also adding that part.
We want to be able to come in and load the uke up on our hip. Okay? Make sure you keep your sleeve activated. Don't let your sleeve die here. Right? As you get better, you can start to lift your right leg up. Count to 2 seconds. Then throw. Right sweeping leg.
So I think that this person, I don't know him personally, but you can see in his demonstration uh, that he knows how to do harai, but he's kind of guilty of all the things that that he just talked about, right? So if we go back to the demonstration, right, you can see here that okay, let's start here. Look at this Kazushi. He's in all the way. Look at how vertical Uke is. No Kazushi, really. This is not where you need to be. See this distance? See this gap here? Don't like it. I want to see really nice and snug, and I want to see this person much further ahead if you're going to be this far in. The other thing is, what happened to the? This is nice and up, which is good, but this elbow. The reason why there's no Kazushi is because hey, what happened to elbowing somebody from behind you, right? Like really, if this elbow has lost a lot of steam because it was actually gotten behind in terms of the technique. So I'd like to see that much further back, like really, like almost parallel to his back. You can see here the foot. Look at that, flat, not even deep enough. Like that's not even parallel to his right foot, right? Um, so I have some issues with the demonstration. Know that we all kind of have these issues, right? But when you practice, you have to kind of diagnose exactly what's going on, right? So that's what a lot of your senseis are trying to teach you.
Your sleeve activated. Don't let your sleeve die here. Right? As you get better, you can start to lift your right leg up. Count to 2 seconds. Then throw.
So I don't know why you care to wait 2 seconds beyond maybe demonstrating that you have control over the person. And if you got good like Kazushi, you would have control over them. So it's really not a big deal. The But you can see here in the way that he's executed this, it's really not as Harai like as you might want it to be because it's not reaping out anything. Like see, you can see here the big gap between his leg and their leg, and if he's it's not transferring. It's not resulting in a meaningful transfer of energy, right? So you want that leg to really catch uh, this outer leg and add to the action of the hands and the upper body here that's working. So this is working, as a, although this is a little bit far, but okay, fine. Um, but the finisher is that this leg, as it extends, really brings this foot whoop all the way over as this is going whoop down. So the demonstration is unfortunately not demonstrating what the early parts of the video um, were talking about.
Then throw. Right sweeping leg is one device, and my forehead pendulums down with my foot. Okay, looks like this. As the tori is.
Okay, so this was done really fast, this demonstration here, but this is going to be a problem sometimes that it's a little bit of, and I think a lot of instructors are guilty of it. The instruction doesn't match the demonstration, so one of the key things that he railed on is keeping a nice stiff right reaping leg, right? And it was very clear, right? Don't break it, right? But as you rewatch this, watch the right leg. Oh, oh, and the telltale sign that you look at when I'm watching my students is this. Look at this. What is this? This is not what you want. You want it to be nice and straight, like it should be bam, right? Not wah. Like why is this down? Why is this here, right? It's it's a bad habit that a lot of us have, and so it's just something to watch out for. Like the elements are maybe pretty good, but the demonstration probably should have redid this.
As the tori, it's my responsibility to make sure that the uke lands in a complete ukemi. Okay, it's my responsibility. So I want to make sure that my technique is clean. So there's two things we could do. We want to make sure that we keep our hands on our uke throughout the whole technique. So once the ukemi is done, then I can let my hands go and transition to something else. Okay. The second thing is mentality. With our mental shooting this technique, we want to commit to it one time. Don't half-ass it. Okay. So when we finish it, it looks like this. Is one device, and my forehead pendulums down with my foot. Okay, looks like this. Okay, and that's just some pointers to help develop your Harai Goshi. Definitely find the good uke, the best uke in your dojo. Give this a try. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to our.
Okay, so the last part actually I think is kind of is an important piece. Uke is also got a big role in developing your technique. Um, and what does he mean by a good uke? A good uke, actually, in my view, is one that understands the point of the exercise. So some exercises you're doing at no resistance with good cooperation, and some you're doing with some resistance, some you're doing with a lot of resistance, some you're doing with so much resistance there's someone holding onto your belt, right? And you know, those are kind of behaviors that you have to look for. Is okay, does this person who is my uke understand the goal here, right? So if I'm trying to really just practice the technique, um, is this uke really helping me? So that's just, I think that's a point that I'd like to add to this. Overall thoughts, it's not a bad video. I think there are certain aspects that maybe beginners aren't going to pick up on. And I think there's a little bit of explanation, further explanation that could be done, but it's not bad by any means. And I just think that there's just some details that a YouTube channel called Perfect the Craft probably should have covered. And so I'm not slamming this video. It's quite good for judo videos on YouTube. This is probably I would call it a much better YouTube video than most judo videos, but there's definitely things about it that I just thought would be good for people to understand. So, anyways, this is my first video. We'll see how well this format goes. Maybe I'll kind of switch it up. I'm just really testing it out, so please leave some feedback in the comments, and I'll see you next time.